Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1098, elected officials, state-owned electric vehicle charging stations, reimbursement. Favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you. As amended, HB 1098 establishes that a state employee who uses a state-owned electric vehicle charging station located at the employee's place of employment to charge a personal electric vehicle may not be subject to reimbursement to the state for the electricity used, and requires any member of the General Assembly who uses a state-owned electric vehicle charging station to charge a personal electric vehicle to reimburse the state for electricity used. The amendments, number 1, explicitly prohibit required reimbursement by state employees. Number 2, limits the bill to members of the General Assembly. Number 3, provides for a sunset. And number 4, to the state employee. And number 4, states the intent of the General Assembly to promote and facilitate the purchase and use of electric vehicles by state employees. Move the amendments.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment is adopted. Recognizing the question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Recognizing the sponsor of this bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, on this rainy day. So I do have a few questions for the floor leader.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hopefully the sun comes out. So my question is, the bill came in as a very simple bill to require elected officials to reimburse the state for use of charging stations. The bill has been amended by the committee. Those are committee amendments, and I now don't know what the bill does, so I was hoping you could explain it.
Sure. As I stated when I introduced the bill provides that state employees are not subject to the reimbursement requirement, but General Assembly employees must reimburse the state for electricity used. The bill, as introduced, provided that all state and local employees must reimburse, which was very confusing. And given the discussion in the committee at the presentation of the bill that it was all about General Assembly employees, we narrowed that to ensure that it is General Assembly employees.
Got it. So for me to recap this so that I can understand, the amendments the committee put on the bill say that the 77,000 state employees can use the charging stations for their personal vehicles. That was what the committee thought was a good idea. I'm just trying to understand this.
Let's be clear about what this says.
Is that a yes or a no?
It's a no.
Oh, really? Really?
No, because there aren't 77 state employees that have plug-in vehicles. So what it is only those state employees that have plug-in vehicles and have access to state chargers
So
do
there are
not have to reimburse. And I do want to
to
correct one thing that I said. I said General Assembly employees. It's actually General Assembly members.
So there are 77,000 state employees. We certainly agree on that. We don't know how many have electric vehicles, but we know that some do. And the committee thought it was a good idea to amend the bill so that all of those 77,000 employees that work for the state of Maryland who are employed, who also happen to have electric vehicles, get to use their personal vehicles at the EV stations owned by the state and get to do so to recharge their cars for free. Is that correct?
What was really interesting is when this bill came in, there was a lot of information that wasn't presented to the committee. So I've done a lot of research since then. And if you figure the number, I did a lot of crunching. So I figured, what was it? There's about 0.4% of Marylanders that have electric vehicles. And the number that I saw of state full-time and part-time jobs, that's not necessarily employees, but jobs, is about 11,900. So if you do the math on that, you've got about 447 that could have electric vehicles. Then we found out, that wasn't presented at the committee hearing, we found out that there are only 88 public charging facilities. So the numbers that we're talking about are actually very, very low.
So I just want to understand, Delegate, because that was a very skillful redirection.
Thank you.
Does the amendment does the amendment that was put on by the committee say that state employees can use these charging stations for their personal vehicles and not have to reimburse the state of Maryland? Yes or no?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So, Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk. It's amendment number 773729/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment, Madam Speaker.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, folks, the bill came into the committee, a really straightforward bill that elected officials have to reimburse the state of Maryland for the use of state-owned charging stations. That's all the bill did. The bill was modified in committee by the committee itself, and the committee found that in its wisdom that the 77,000 state employees who happen to have, any number of them who happen to have electric vehicles, get to use the charging stations for free for their personal vehicles. That's what the bill now does. So this amendment basically says that those state employees and the elected officials, to the extent that they use EV stations that are owned by the state of Maryland, have to reimburse the state of Maryland for charging those vehicles. It's a good government amendment. The bill is a good government amendment. This is a good government amendment. And I just would like to say, I'm not finished yet, but I'm getting there. I'd just like to say the Department of Government Services, when I had a conversation with them, said that they thought that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 or so charging stations across the state, but they were kind of like in different departments at different locations across the state. And as you know, DGS's job is to try to figure out where the stuff is that the state owns. And the floor leader just said that she thought there were more than 40 or 40 or more, which is interesting because that's a new number that I've heard. And the reason for the bill is really simple, and that is that since we keep seeing bills in this legislature that are prescribing free stuff for electric car owners, that it sure makes sense that we bring down the gauntlet on the EV charging stations for all state employees and all elected officials, so they have to reimburse the state when they charge at those charging stations. Here's the simple principle. When all of us here who have cars stop at the gas station to fill our cars up with gasoline, we have to pay at the gasoline station for our gas. We have to swipe our credit card or pay cash. And that is a pretty simple principle. We don't just get to like drive in and fill up the gas station, fill up our car and say, hey, thank you very much, see you. It's free. And I think that this same principle should be applied to electric cars. I'm somewhat baffled as to how you can think that it shouldn't be applied to electric cars, to the state employees who have them, who might use the electric vehicle charging stations for their electric cars, or for the state officials who do the same. It's a good government bill. I mean, it should have just been passed out the way it was, or it could have been amended to include the state employees. But nonetheless, the bill came in that way, and now the bill, with this amendment, to be clear to the members, the amendment says, if you're a state employee or if you're an elected official, you can use an EV station, but you got to reimburse the state when you use it for your personal car. Common sense amendment, makes sense. It's a shame that we're having to force this very simple amendment on the members to actually vote on it. It really shouldn't have gotten this far, but unfortunately it has. And it's certainly not under my control. Certainly the committee could have done the right thing, in my opinion, but they didn't. So that's why we have this amendment on the floor, as opposed to dealing with it in the committee where it probably would have made the most sense. So, Madam Speaker, for all those reasons, I would like to move this amendment. It makes perfect sense. It's a good government amendment It's a way of protecting all the members on this floor. It protects all the members on this floor in such a way as we can all say when we go home, we passed a bunch of different good government bills. One of them says that with the growth of all these EV charging stations, we're going to put the kibosh on free electricity for personal vehicles at these state-owned charging stations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County in the Annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had a question. We get reimbursed for mileage. If they use these free charging stations here, if they have an electric car, do they get paid the same amount of mileage as we per mile?
Are you talking about General Assembly members?
Yes. We get paid for traveling expenses, and we get so much per mile.
Right, we get mileage, yes.
Okay. The electric vehicles that are being charged here at no cost, are they paid the same amount?
They can apply for mileage reimbursement, yes.
So they're going to get the same amount as I do and do not have to buy fuel. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
We're
I've
paid
always
for
asked
mileage.
myself that when I drove past these cars. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I think
Recognizing committee chair.
first I think it's appropriate to say that the committee resists the amendment. That was number one. Number two, let me explain very simply how the bill came in and how the bill has been amended by the committee. As the bill came in, all elected officials would have to pay for their electricity. That means Kumar Barve and a member of your county council. What we did is we limited it to members of this General Assembly. You, me, Kumar Barve will have to pay for the electricity that he consumes to charge his car up in our garage. Okay? That's what we will have to do. But what we are saying is that your county council member or your constituents who are state employees would not have to. Let me read to you the operative policy phrase here. Be it further enacted that it is the intent of the General Assembly to promote and facilitate the purchase and use of electric vehicles by state employees to the maximum extent feasible. Now, I will only say that electric vehicles are very efficient. They, we get reimbursed. We elected officials get reimbursed 56 cents per mile. And state employees would only receive reimbursement if they're on state work that requires them to, drive to some remote place, which is vast majority of instances doesn't happen. So roughly speaking, the electricity costs us all 2 cents a mile. So the reimbursement is 56 cents a mile. Whether you have an electric vehicle or a gas vehicle, the vast majority of the reimbursement is for the wear and tear of your vehicle, not for the fuel put into it. And so we would ask to resist the amendment and uphold the overall principle that we as a General Assembly, the majority of us, do want to encourage the use of electric vehicles. And this is a policy that we have had as a body and as a state for a very, very long time, and the amount of cost is extremely minor. Let me remind you that a state agency does not, under this bill, have to provide charging for its state employees. If they want to, they can. If they want to let a car driver plug into a regular wall socket, which is a very low rate of consumption, they can do that too. They just can't charge my legislative aide or other state employees for the electricity. We, on the other hand, as policymakers, I think it's completely reasonable for me to pay $20 a month for the electricity that I use. And that's why we amended the bill the way we did, and it's why I would ask you to resist the amendment.
Gentleman from Charles.
Thank you. I have a question for the floor leader.
Good morning.
Good morning. I guess I'm confused, and you and I are in a very similar category on this as far as the vehicles we drive. Currently, this was targeted, I guess, for elected officials, correct?
Yes, state and local.
So, I guess it's my understanding, we don't all have access to these chargers, do we?
That is correct.
So there's a limited number of chargers, correct?
Correct.
And only certain individuals get to use them.
Correct.
And what the bill says is that we could all use them if we, I don't understand, I'm trying to understand what, as amended, the bill now says. Do I now have access to these chargers?
No, you don't. The bill says if you use them, you pay for them. You and I still don't have access
But
to
we
them.
don't get to use them.
No, unfortunately not.
Oh, okay. All right. My bad. Thank you.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Madam Speaker, can the floor leader or maybe the committee chair take a couple of questions? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. My question was about the numbers that we just went over, so maybe the committee chair would be better.
Committee chair.
Sure.
Yeah, we were just talking about the state reimbursement, and you said it was 56 cents a mile.
Yes.
And you said the difference between a gas-powered vehicle and an electric vehicle would be about 2 cents.
No, that's not what I said. What I said is that, let me go to my little chart here. For a electric vehicle, it works out to being a little over 2 cents a mile for the electricity. For a gas vehicle, that gets an average of, if you assume 27 miles to the gallon, which
I
is the
was
average.
working off the round number of 20.
Well, but cars are more efficient than that nowadays. And if you assume $2.60 a gallon for gasoline, which is, about what it is, I guess. I don't pay attention to it that much anymore. It's roughly 9.6 cents a gallon. So whether it's electricity or gasoline, the portion of the per diem that goes to reimburse fuel is very, very small.
I'm not sure I follow you on those numbers at all, to tell you the truth. What's the delta between the electric car and the gas car? Because the way you're stating it is basically the fuel difference is on a electric vehicle is 2 cents. And then doing the math real quickly, you're saying 27 cents or 27 miles per gallon. That works out to a gallon of gas of being 54 cents a gallon in comparison for an electric car to a gas car. And I don't know if those numbers really jive.
I don't want to bore this body with the math, but I can certainly show you the calculation that I've made.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Madam Speaker, on the amendment.
On the amendment.
See, I think this highlights some of the problem. We have a bunch of fuzzy math, and I think at the heart of the amendment is to treat everyone fair. You have overwhelmingly 77,000 state employees in Maryland, and every one of them or just nearly every one of them pays to fuel their vehicle. This amendment is made so that it puts everybody on a level playing field. And now I understand the committee's proposal is we want employees to have electric cars, and we're trying to encourage that by giving them free fuel as they're in doing state operations or whatever. We're going to pay for their fuel. But the question is, to me, is when does this policy go into effect? Because at some point, everyone is responsible for themselves and getting themselves to work and paying for the fuel in their own vehicle. If this policy isn't happening today, then when? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Just to point out,
Committee Chair.
that provision of the bill sunsets on September 30th, 2030, which is around the time we have all our goals for renewable energy, and we have a lot of environmental goals that are pegged to air quality that end in 2030, and that's when we decided to sunset this provision. At that point, the legislature can relook at the whole issue.
Recognizing the gentleman from Talbot.
Thank you. I have a question for the floor leader.
Floor leader.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So I'm not an expert with the electric charging stations, but I've been to a number of ribbon cuttings. We celebrate them it's a positive thing in the community. But the electric charging stations in the public parking lots, are those free?
No.
So if you go to the public parking lot and you want to use that charging station, you have to pay for it. I don't know because I don't drive an electric car.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I understand the way the bill works is if you are a state employee and you have an electric car, you can go to the DGS location and charge up for free.
If there is a charging station, which there are very few, yes.
So if the state employees can do that, can the general public also go and charge their vehicles there?
Can they go to a state facility and charge their vehicles there?
Yeah.
They couldn't do it for free. I don't know whether they have access to it. I don't know where all 88 of them are, but they couldn't do it for free.
So who?
Oh, and you can only do it at your place of employment.
Okay, you could
Can't
do it.
go anywhere in the
your
state.
place of employment, and the charging station, how is it funded? Who pays for it?
Well, we're talking about state-owned, state-employed, or state-installed charging systems.
Well, I think that means the answer is the taxpayers pay for the charging station and they pay for the electricity that goes to that charging station. That's accurate, right?
That the taxpayers paid for it? Yes.
So why can't the taxpayers also enjoy the opportunity to use the charging station?
I don't even know how to answer that question. There's
Yeah, it was
so
kind of a
much to
trick. It was kind of a trick question. There's no.
There's no real answer to that question. I mean, the bottom line. Look, let's talk about the bottom line of this bill. There's a nugget of the bill that was introduced that makes sense, which is that we as elected officials should pay for our electricity. The other portion of the bill, which I wish I had seen the amendment, I was not offered the opportunity to review the amendment. But what that's targeting and what the other part of the bill is targeting is really wanting to encourage state employees to purchase electric vehicles because of our environmental goals and to incentivize that purchase because of our environmental goals. And that is also why, as the chair of the committee mentioned, that portion of the bill sunsets in 2030. So that's what this bill is all about.
Yeah, and I get this the intent. And I mean, having your own VIP charging station I get that. However, what I don't get is the way the general public is treated on one hand and the state employees are treated differently on another. You know, they got this privileged opportunity to get free charges. Meanwhile, a majority of the public that's using gas-powered vehicles, right now, the price of gas has gone up a penny every day. So they're paying more and more and more, largely because of actions of the government that are driving what's going on in the market. And meanwhile, in the world of the electric vehicles, it just makes no sense to me. I just wanted to make sure this is what the bill actually did. It makes no sense that state employees would be able to benefit from free charges when the general public who pay for the charging station and the juice that goes to the charging station not be able to utilize what's there.
Delegate, with all due respect, that's the same argument as saying, you know, the general taxpayer pays for the state employee's health plan and therefore they should have the exact same health plan. So with all due respect, that argument isn't really relevant to this bill.
Yeah, that's a real controversial topic. I don't want to bring that one up right now, but I think the amendment would put this bill back on proper footing and balance with the taxpayers. So I just want to echo my support for the amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman from Montgomery in the annex on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to address a couple of questions that came up. There are cases, I think it's important for the General Assembly to know, there are cases in which charging is free to the public. For example, in some shopping centers and malls, when they want people to come, it's free. The general idea that we have been pushing forward in the state of Maryland and we have been pushing forward in this country and in the world is the idea that we need to transition to electric vehicles. And the reason we need to do that is because the number one contributing factor to greenhouse gases is the transportation sector. So in 2011, this body and the governor moved forward with a zero emission vehicle mandate. And since then, we have tried to do whatever we can to push forward on electric vehicles. Now, in this particular case, I think what's important is, because I've heard the idea of a level playing field, I've heard that multiple times. I think it's important for the General Assembly to know that from a policy perspective, if you want a level playing field, if you really want a level playing field, then we need to take into consideration over $100 billion given to the fossil fuel industry every single year. So what does that mean? That means you're paying $2.50 or $2.60 for a gallon of gas right now, and not the $5 or $6 or $7 you should be paying. And then what ends up happening is the taxpayer pays for stormwater management. The taxpayer ends up paying for sea rise. The taxpayer ends up paying all the costs that are associated with the polluting of the fossil fuel industry, and the transportation sector being the number one violator of that. So I think it's important when we talk about leveling the playing field, if you really want to level the playing field, then you need to pay a lot more for a gallon of gasoline than you're currently paying. And I think this bill, along with the other bills in stated policy, all they do is to help level the playing field. Thank you.
The maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I certainly appreciate the gentleman from Montgomery County talking about his passion about electric cars. Problem is I think he was on some other bill, which maybe is his Clean Cars Act, which passed recently, which has $1.8 million in it to build even more charging stations that the state will own. So even more opportunities for free fuel for just the woke. It would be the equivalent of what the gentleman's arguing is the equivalent of there being legislative gas stations. Gas stations for the state, gas stations where you just drive up if you're, a legislator or a state employee, and you just fill up your car and you drive off. And that is the really unprincipled argument that I think that is being made, which just baffles me why the amendment just wasn't accepted to begin with. It would have made things much more commonsensical. But nonetheless, on this amendment, Madam Speaker, the amendment's very simple. It says that if you use a state EV charging station for your personal vehicle, you have to reimburse the state. The floor leader said that they're metered. They're metered, some of them, according to DGS, but there's no reimbursement mechanism in place. So who cares if they're metered if there's no credit card that's required to swipe it in advance? Moreover, in Maryland, there are 26,000 electric vehicles, 26,000. And we keep growing state-owned infrastructure for electric charging stations. We don't know how many people that are even non-state employees who could potentially use these charging stations as well. This is not the function of state government to provide free fuel for people's personal vehicles. It's a very simple principle. We've heard lots of redirection here today, all kinds of redirection. Pay no attention to what the bill really does. Look over here. Look at these shiny electric cars because those are really cool and woke and virtuous. But really, all the bill and all this amendment, I should say, really does that I'm offering here today is to say that if you're using an electric vehicle and you're an elected official, or if you're using an electric vehicle and you're a state employee, or if you're anybody who's using a personal electric vehicle, you can't use state charging stations without reimbursing the state of Maryland. How could anyone vote against this? Why would it even be necessary for me to put this amendment on the floor? I didn't want to put it on the floor. I even went to the committee chairman in advance last week and offered it. So, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, I've been put into this position. It's unnecessary. And the members have been put into this position, not by me. So for all those reasons, I say, make the elected officials pay. I dare anyone get up and say that they shouldn't. And I dare anyone to get up and say, oh, if you're special and you have an electric vehicle, and if you're special because you work for the state and it's your personal electric vehicle, you should get free electricity. I dare anyone to say it. It makes no sense. It's wrong. It's unprincipled. For all those reasons, Madam Speaker, I move this amendment. Thank you.
Majority Leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. woke, virtuous. I mean, there's a valid policy disagreement here. I apologize to the members of this body that you've been exposed to these rants and diatribes and insults all session. It is entirely possible to discuss this without being rude or criticizing the committee. So, to everyone in the debate, sorry you have to put up with that. The real policy disagreement here is just about whether and to what extent we should incent the use of electric vehicles. That's all it comes down to. I think that elected officials should have to pay for the electricity they get because it's, we shouldn't get perks of office. You should run for office and get elected to office because you want to make a difference and not for any other reason. But I do think that it is good for Maryland and for Marylanders for us to incent in a variety of ways the use of electric and low emissions vehicles. Why? Because our constituents like to breathe clean air. Because they like to travel to Ocean City, and hopefully sea level rise will not inundate it. I don't buy the argument that just because we give something to someone, we're hurting someone else, which seems to be the core argument of a lot of debate this session. It's good for Marylanders if more of our state employees use electric vehicles. It's good for all Marylanders. In fact, electric vehicles are good generally, which is why we not only have some charging stations at state parking lots, but incent the installation of charging stations in private residences and in parking lots and in all sorts of places to create the infrastructure for electric vehicles. So I would ask the body to stick with the floor leader and the committee chair to recognize that climate change is real, that we need to do something about it, and that policies that assist us in transitioning away from fossil fuels are good for all of us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Many will agree I am a simple man, but I rise to support this amendment for the simple case. If this was to take care of all state employees to give them free electricity, that would be one thing. Then you would be talking about the whole, not an individual cut out community that is going to get special treatment versus another community. Just because someone can't afford an electric car doesn't mean that as an employee they shouldn't have the opportunity to go one of these few charging stations. Why should one employee suffer against the other? You are picking winners and losers, and dividing communities against other communities is wrong. We once did this in this country. It was called redlining. And I spoke up against this a couple days ago. It is much different. It does not have the effect that redlining did years ago and still does. But please, don't stand up and say about the environment, I support clean environment. I support those things. But you are putting one employee against another because they are going to now receive a benefit. That is not equality. And I stand for this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.